Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. Today, we are waking up with watches and everything you see is in stock and for sale. If you haven't seen yesterday's inventory show, I'm doing a part 1 and a part 2 this weekend. 2 shows, more inventory. We may have sold some of those watches, but probably not all of them in the last 24 hours. So if you're ready for an inventory overload, join me today and then check out yesterday's part 1. Everything here is for sale. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing details. We also love trades and we like to buy watches because we need to build inventory. We pay cash, we pay fast, no upper limit on value paid. To buy, trade, or sell, including watches on yesterday's show, reach out to me directly. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. Let's start with something that came out in 2019, a limited edition of 900 pieces in steel, 39.5 millimeters. This is the Grand Seiko Autumn SBGH269, a high beat watch inspired by late summer, early autumn in Japan. Now we have a lovely lacquered multi-step finished dial that also is inspired by the warmth of traditional lacquered Japanese flooring, which shares a lot of tones with fall foliage. So you can see that dial extravagantly crafted. The watch only 13.3 millimeters thick, and though dressy in some regards, it is 100 meters water resistant. Note the quality of the dial, both the base and the dial furniture, including the frame for the date, the logo, the indices, and the hands. These parts on a Grand Seiko are finished manually by artisans using diamond-tipped milling tools, and these artisans only craft these components all day long. They are then placed on the dial manually. You can see the faceting includes both satination and polish, particularly on the razor-sharp Dauphine hands for the hours and minutes. Now on the reverse side, we have a thrillingly anodized green titanium rotor, and the green is supposed to reference those few leaves that retain their summertime verdure into the fall. So you've got a fall foliage on both sides, and the movement is the 9S85, which is a high beat, 10 beats per second like a Zenith El Primero, yet automatic winding with a 55-hour power reserve, impressive given the beat rate. Because of the 10 beat per second rate, the seconds hand sweeps smoother. The movement is watchmaker made, watchmaker adjusted, and runs no worse than -3 +5 seconds per 24 hours in static testing before it leaves the factory. That, tested in 6 positions, exceeds COSC chronometer standards. Now the watch has a hand-polished case. The case is actually finished against a spinning tin plate on a Zaratsu machine. The word for this in Japanese is Zaratsu, and this finishing takes about 3 years to master as an artisan. So not only is this dial handcrafted, not only is the movement hand-assembled and adjusted, but the case itself is hand-finished, which is why this is probably the best value in truly handmade watches you're going to find. Nothing Swiss even comes close. A beautiful fit for my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. It would be a nice match on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. But let's say you want something that's sportier, much sportier. Well, have I got the solution for you. For a long time, the H. Moser & C Pioneer was an appealing sports watch, but not one you would compare with something like a Rolex Submariner, a no-date sub. Well, now the no-date sub is 41 millimeters, and the Pioneer is not only 40 rather than its previous 42.8. The Pioneer in this 100-piece Govberg limited edition is now titanium, equipped with a full bracelet, 40 millimeters, and equipped with a rotating bezel. All of these features not characteristic of most previous Pioneers, now all present in a package that makes this a true Rolex rival. Let's take a quick look at the lume, because here's one aspect of the Moser that just beats the pants off of the Geneva Giant. Take a look at this dial. All of the lume on the dial, solid blocks of ceramic-based Globalite lume, and then the entirety of its hugely vocal and chunky bezel has been lumed. The bezel insert is actually titanium, which allows for inlays of ceramic lume material. The dial is beautifully bright by night, and actually it's just as bright by day in Moser's signature funky blue color. They like to make fumé dials, fumé meaning smoked in French. We have light at the center, dark at the edge, and the case is all media blasted muted satin. It's only just slightly over 48 millimeters end link to end link, and it's only 11.6 millimeters thick. Every link of the bracelet is removable for fine tuning of fit. If you don't like that, you've still got other options, courtesy of a roughly 1 centimeter incrementally adjustable. Let me show you that incrementally adjustable clasp. You press down on the Moser logo, and the clasp allows the bracelet to move in and out with several different stops and detents, and about 1 centimeter of total extensible length. So that 1 centimeter in total, you can see, is operated by a spring and rack system. We have a twin trigger release, a single swing arm. We also have a movement of Moser's own manufacture. They make not just the bridges and the plates and the wheels, but also the hairspring, the balance wheel, and the escapement. This is HMC 200, 72-hour power reserve. It does feature hacking seconds, and because it's a sports watch movement, a full balance bridge and a free-sprung balance for toughness. Now, when you throw it on the wrist, you get a better sense of how compact this latest Pioneer is. This is the Pioneer Rotating Bezel Govberg Jewelers Edition, and it wears beautifully. It is more compact than a sub. It's also about a millimeter thinner than a sub, which you might not have seen coming. A really good match for my wrist. It's also available on an array of factory straps. These only come on the bracelet, but we can always load you up with factory Moser straps in a 20 millimeter size if you wish. A really special watch, feather light, all in ceramic, sapphire, and titanium. And I love the fact that it is short across the wrist. So these lugs are coming nowhere near the edge of my forearm. A really cool piece, one of the best divers you can buy in the current market. Let's see if you can guess this one. I'm guessing not. What do you think that is? If you guessed Breitling Endurance Pro, you are correct. The thing about this Endurance Pro is that it is a watch designed essentially to supplant your smartwatch or your digital device, while still giving you most of the refinements of a dyed-in-the-wool luxury watch product. This came out in 2020, and it's 44 millimeters in a material called Breitling, and let's call it what it is. It's a very resilient, scratch-proof type of plastic. Maybe not scratch-proof, but extremely resilient against scratches. It's exceptionally hard, so if you've seen that Omega Bioceramic, this is not like that. This will actually resist scratching and scuffing. The watch is only 12.5 millimeters thick, a consequence of its quartz motivation in the form of caliber 82. It's 100 meters water resistant. One feature I love is that the bezel, which is a aviator-style bidirectional compass rose, but it still uses the captive bezel construction. Let me show you how this works. It still uses the captive bezel construction that you find on metal Breitling watches. So the bezel is fixed to the case using screws like you'll find on a Zinn. This is a very robust way of making a bezel. The case is super resilient. It's actually wearing my nail down as I attempt to scratch it with my nail. You can't do it. It has a wonderfully color-coordinated rubber shoulder for the crown, which is titanium. 100 meters water resistant, well loomed. It is a super quartz, which means it's accurate to 15 seconds a year, not 15 seconds a month like a standard quartz. And it's also thermocompensated, which means being a Endurance Pro, it has great endurance. It will not change its timing fast or slow as extremes of temperature act upon the watch. What I also like is that it is a COSC certified quartz chronometer, which is an exceptionally rare thing and holds the watch to a standard far in excess of a standard mechanical watch. Now, on the wrist, you'll find it surprisingly wearable, as this chronograph is, yes, 44 millimeters in diameter, but reasonably short across the wrist. So if your wrist is my size or smaller, you're going to find it's a good fit. Being super light, you can also see it's almost like it's not there. It feels toy-like, and it's low enough that it will fit underneath a cuff. Now, taking a quick look at the watch in detail, let's get a little bit closer here. You can see that the dial is surprisingly deluxe with raised individual tri-Arabic numerals and an applique Breitling logo, an array of color, a gorgeous and unexpected pulsation scale rather than a tachymeter on the flange underneath. We have on the front a sapphire crystal. We've got a date. We've got all the standard features you would expect on a modern Swiss movement, including a quick set date and a hacking seconds function. And we have a wonderful little tenth of a second instrument. So this actually measures 1/10 of a second, like a Zenith El Primero, even though the chronograph itself is quartz. So it's full of surprises and a real crowd pleaser. You'll find that there's no more need to wear your smartwatch. There's no more need to wear your G-Shock or your Timex Ironman. This watch can replace all of those while keeping a Swiss-made luxury product on your wrist, and even the Breitling case, the scratch-resistant plastic. This is 100% made in Switzerland. It's not some outsourced thing brought in from the Far East. This watch is, again, a way to stay upscale without having to go G-Shock, and a way to stick with traditional analog timekeeping without having to go digital or smartwatch. Now here's a watch I love, not because it's a JLC Reverso, though I do love that. This is the Reverso Grand Reserve. Now while that might sound like some sort of American malted liquor, it is actually a watch that features a spectacular digital caseback power reserve. So as you wind it, it pretty much jumps from numeral to numeral, and as it discharges, it also jumps from numeral to numeral. So it gives you these digitized one-day power reserve indications, and when it gets down to its last day of power reserve, 1 day and 0 days remaining are red. When it gets to the top of its rated 8-day power reserve, it will tell you that it is bump, 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 bump. It is up. Now the watch has a movement based on the original 877, which was created for the 70th anniversary Reverso, a large shaped caliber with 2 mainspring barrels. It has an 8-day rated power reserve, though in fact it will run for almost 10. You get this XGT case, which also debuted on the 70th, the 70th anniversary Reverso. It's only 46.5 millimeters from lug to lug. It was bigger than the Grand Tie. It was the extra Grand Tie, but it wasn't large by the standards of watches like the Reverso 976 that would come along later. You can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it's a good match, and it looks like a classical Reverso. It's just 12.2 millimeters thick, so it does fit underneath the cuff. This one has a JLC Fagliano designed strap on it, still made by Camille Fournet in Europe, but using the design created by Casa Fagliano for JLC out of Argentina. You have a classical Reverso dial that really doesn't hint at what's going on the back. We've got the classic squared off conical lugs, the strakes or gadroons that run all the way around. Though it does have a caseback power reserve, there's still plenty of canvas available if you want to have this customized by JLC with engraving, lacquering, or enamel. And it has a really upscale movement inside, created for a watch that in its day cost tens of thousands of dollars. This caliber 874 is descended from that great 877. It's also related to the movement used in the Panerai 190, 197, and 198s, this 8-day movement. A really cool piece, suitable for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters in spite of its XGT case size. One of my favorite modern Reversos. But let's say you don't want a modern LeCoultre or Jaeger-LeCoultre watch at all. Well, let's head back to the 1950s and LeCoultre and Jaeger-LeCoultre's first diving watch, the E857 Deep Sea Diving Alarm. And that is exactly what we have right here. 1,061 of these were made from 1959 to 1962. At the edge of the bezel, it measures 39.5 millimeters. We have vintage-style unsigned crowns that are correct to the model. You can see, though, it does feature marks of wear, including a few dents and many scratches. The metal is remarkably full and retains its definition quite well. So while it's been worn and there are signs of use, it's also been sparsely refinished through its long life. It features a bumper automatic caliber K815, K for KIF. This is one of the shock-protected movements. That movement came out in 1956. And as you shake it on your wrist, you feel more than hear the bumpity-bum of the hammer that winds the movement, and it has 2 stop springs that cause it to bounce back and forth. It's got an 18,000 vibration per hour beat rate, and the result is that it has this slow chugging pocket watch style seconds hand. And yes, it is a diving alarm, acoustically tuned to sound louder underwater than it does above. And we had 2 different versions of this watch back in the 50s. At about a 4-to-1 ratio, they were made first for the US market and second for the European market. So about 4 times as many LeCoultre dials were made as Jaeger-LeCoultre dials, but so few survive because old diving watches generally got trashed and worn until the case seals expired and the watches filled up with water, at which time many were simply canned. So very few of the US or European dials exist at this point. It's super easy to set the alarm. As with the action of the bumper inside the movement, you can almost feel the rattle of the alarm more than you can hear it. It was designed to conduct itself particularly well underwater. The dial is tritium. The hands at some point have been replaced, so that's the one thing I'll note. These are not the original hands, but everything else, especially the dial, incredibly clean and well preserved. The lacquer of the bezel, as well as the index infill, usually goes quite quickly. Here, it's remarkably intact. On the reverse side, you can see the image of the scuba diver with rebreather, flippers, and spear. And again, this is all to match the dial. The case back is LeCoultre, the dial is LeCoultre. They were made as LeCoultre for the US market and Jaeger-LeCoultre for the European market. The bumper automatic, in addition to being a wonderfully nostalgic piece, has a 45-hour power reserve. And though 39.5 millimeters might not seem like a lot in 2023, back then it was huge. This was the period when the amateur diving boom was in full swing, and everyone from Eterna to Omega to Rolex, Blancpain, LeCoultre, Zenith, and Breitling, among many others, were getting into the dive watch market. But aside from the Vulcain Nautical, diving alarms were rare things, and that was LeCoultre's contribution to the vernacular of the dive watch. The timepiece wears beautifully. It's got about a 14 millimeter thickness, and you can see a lovely cambered plexiglass in excellent condition over the dial. This might be the coolest piece on the show today, and certainly it's the one that I personally desire the most. Let's take a look at something that actually qualifies as independent horology, because at the time that this much more enamel dial was made, Roger Dubuis was very much an independent watch brand. Now, this watch was likely built between about 2003, when Dubuis received its patent on these curved enamel dials, and about 2006, 2007, when the company stopped using the Longines L990 as its movement base. Well, here we do have the Longines L990 in a watch that is a 28-piece limited edition. The L990, also known as the Breguet 8810 and Breguet 8815, was created in 1978 as a thin, fine haute horlogerie movement with potential to act as a tractor caliber for complications. Here, Roger Dubuis has upgraded it to Geneva seal finish. You can see the Geneva seal on the bridges as well as on the base plate. Automatic winding with twin barrels and a 44-hour power reserve. It's adjusted in 5 positions like a chronometer. It's been vastly upgraded with lush and lovely abrasive wheel Côte de Genève, mirrored anglage on every bridge, a black polished stud holder and swan's neck fine adjustment. We've got black polished screws with chamfered slots in circumference. We've got engine turning on the base plate, satination on all of the wheels, and it beats away at 4 hertz. It is a great looking movement. The case back is contoured. The watch in rose gold is 34.5 millimeters from side to side and about 56 millimeters from lug to lug, though only 10.2 millimeters thick. Taking a look at the dial, it is one of several enamel dials created in this series. This is the image of Africa and its surrounding seas. For those who have sentimental attachments to the continent by birth or perhaps visitation over the years, or maybe you're a fan of the band Toto. But regardless, we have a lovely miniature painted enamel dial. This is not just Grand Faux enamel. This is a curved dial, incredibly difficult to enamel. It's a wonderfully buffed and polished piece of stainless steel that is then enamel coated because the enamel better adheres to steel. The process for doing this was patented by Dubuis in 2003. Now, it's not just enamel, because we have figures and images and different color gradients, and all of this is miniature painting. Anyone can do enamel at some level. It can even be done cheaply. We see that in the Seiko Presage collection. Well, the Presage is nice. It's not great. great enamel, but it gets you on board. What this does, though, is take you to the state of the art. So we have not only enameling, but different colors, different weights of vitreous glass paint applied, multiple firings, sharply defined figures for the ship, the sea, the land masses, the wind, the anthropomorphic cloud, the compass rose, the quad Roman numerals, the fish, Madagascar, the animals, the flora and fauna on land. All of this is painted in miniature, which is a separate, though sometimes overlapping art alongside enamel. This is both. Throw in the watch on the wrist. You can see it's a big piece. I recommend it for a larger wrist than mine. My wrist is 16 centimeters circumference. I think you need a 17 centimeter circumference wrist, but you will note that it is quite thin. So if you've got a broad enough wrist, it will fit underneath the cuff. Audemars Piguet is the Royal Oak company. Most of Audemars Piguet's watches, 90%, are Royal Oaks. But that's not to say all Royal Oaks are created equal. This is reference 15407 in steel. It came out in 2016. It upgraded the prior open-wrought or open-worked Royal Oak to a 41mm case and a unique double balance architecture. This is automatic winding, 45-hour caliber 5132, and what's special about it is that it features two 180-degree opposed hairsprings. Pardon me, it is 3132. So the 3132 uses a full balance bridge with a free-sprung balance, but take a look at the orientation of the stud holder. This one on the dial side is facing inward, and on the opposite side, you can see that it is facing outward. So what AP does here is they double the mass of the oscillator with these interconnected double balance wheels, which are free sprung for durability. But then by taking two flat hairsprings and turning them 180 degrees opposed, when one due to gravity is going to speed up, the other by an equal and opposite margin, because of its orientation, will slow down. So in any position, it instantaneously corrects the error. And that is what a tourbillon does, but a tourbillon needs time to do it, and a tourbillon only does it properly when vertically arrayed inside a pocket, in a pocket watch. This is a solution to positionally induced timing deviation in a wristwatch. The finish is the Audemars Piguet you dream of, with real anglage laid down by hand, not machining mills. And you can see so many sharp interior angles where bevels meet. There are dozens of them on both sides, and they exhaust any effort to count them all. All of this is adjusted in 5 positions, which is the chronometer standard. It has a wonderful hand-finished and skeletonized rotor. The entire movement, bridges, plates, even the mainspring barrel has been evacuated, and then the tops of what remains the bridge is satinated with black polished screws and satinated wheels in the train. It even features a refinement that allows you to set it precisely in the form of hacking seconds. And while you might not necessarily have been expecting this, it's also pretty well loomed for a watch of this type. It is also one of the most readable skeleton watches. Now, because it has a screw-down crown and a 50-meter water resistance rating, this is a surface swimmable watch. My only advice to you would be that given that this is a full bracelet Royal Oak, you want to consider it more like a 42 or a 43mm round watch, because these always wear larger than their rated size. That said, you could wear this watch on a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference, and it has wonderfully good manners relative to your cuff with a low slung curved profile. So this is a rare Royal Oak that is as impressively finished externally as it is internally, and vice versa. Usually Royal Oak finish peaks with the bracelet, the case, and the bezel. With something like a 3120 or a 4401 or a 4302 AP caliber, all of the bevels are ugly, straight, and obviously machine milled. Here we get a spectacular feast of AP at its best. And if you look, we even have a mirror polished inner bezel. This watch exhausts superlatives. It is the Royal Oak to own. But if you want something perhaps a bit more Teutonic on your wrist and more wearable in size, allow me to introduce you to this 2019 model year 100-piece limited edition, the Lange und Söhne Langematic Perpetual Honey Gold. Honey Gold, in addition to having a wonderful soft color, color somewhere between unplated white gold and rose gold, or pink gold maybe, or straw gold. I don't know how to describe it, but it has a wonderfully soft warmth. It's almost like desaturated yellow gold. If you took a photo of yellow gold and then super desaturated it and lowered the temperature, you would get this, somewhere between white and yellow. And honey gold has a 300 Vickers hardness, meaning it's as hard and scratch resistant as some steels. The watch is only 38.5 millimeters in diameter, and this was only the fourth model to be made with honey gold. It gets better. As you look at the dial, you can see the frame for the date, the numerals, all the hands, those too are honey gold. And the dial features a sterling silver dial base, a solid gold moon phase, and if you look carefully, there's a coining underneath the hour track that is unique to this model and not found on other Lange perpetuals. As with the Royal Oak Openworked double balance, it is surprisingly well loomed, including sub-registers. And because this is the Saxomat 3/4 rotor automatic, watch the seconds hand. When I pull the crown, it has a 0 reset, so you can easily set the watch against a reference time to the second. It is a perpetual calendar, so it can deal with irregular length months and leap years, but its moon phase disc is even better. It has an interval of adjustment of 122 years, and because this is a Lange, the dial is made of sterling silver and the moon phase disc is made of solid gold. Flip it over, you can see that caliber L922, the Saxomat. How fine is this movement? Well, take a look at that rotor. The rotor is made of 21 karat gold. The mass is made of platinum. They're held together using blued screws, and the ball bearing at center is capped by a black polished plate. There's a spiral satination under the rotor, engine turning in 1, 2, 3 sizes on the base plate. We have both black polished screws and large fire blued screws. You can see that the ratchet wheel has been black polished. The swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism has been black polished. The cap to the escape wheel has been black polished. We have German silver bridges, a nickel copper zinc alloy with the copper giving them their golden hue. Take a look at the balance cock, freehand engraved with a burr and no two exactly alike. Take a look at the edges of the bridges, mirrored anglage. Although it's not anglage because we're not in Switzerland, we're not going to use the French term. I need to figure out what the German term is for beveling. And then we have stripes, again, not Côte de Genève because we're in Saxony here. This is a fine example of East German watchmaking. The watch is adjusted in 4 positions. It pivots on 43 jewels. You could see that it is individually numbered out of 100 pieces, and it features a matching honey gold buckle, a spectacular watch, a little giant that punches above its weight, a perpetual calendar that need not be adjusted, and a gold that's able to shrug off marks, indentations, and scuffs that would leave an impression on lesser precious metal watches. This watch is Lange in every regard, and the Lange Perpetual as a model has been a long-time standard in the catalog. A lot of folks have said that the big 3 of Lange would be the Lange 1, the Dotograph, and the Zeitwerk, but if you were to name a 4th watch, a lot of folks believe it would be this, the Lange Perpetual. I lied. I've got a scene stealer, a show stealer, a watch that's going to drop your jaw even more than that Lange, and it comes from our friends at Max Buser and Friends. Friends indeed, with friends like this. And friends like this include Stephen McDonnell. Of course, Max Buser's friends are responsible for everything from the aesthetic design to the fabrication of the straps, clasps, and mechanics of his watches. This is the Legacy Machine Split Escapement in titanium, a 33-piece limited edition that came out in 2019. We have a dramatic chameleon-like dial that transitions between green and purple with every shade in between. 3 lacquered subdials, one for the 72-hour power reserve indicator, one for the radial style date, which you can adjust with a pusher, and then one for the hours and the minutes. Now, this is the Legacy Machine series, which originally launched in 2011, and the idea is to hypothesize about what a wristwatch designed by MB&F would have looked like in the late 19th century, in the steampunk era, in the Jules Verne sci-fi era. Well, Jules Verne would have loved this watch, primarily because it's beautiful. Outside, we have a rather spare case and an enormous vaulted sapphire. We have a 14mm diameter balance that's free-sprung for durability and mounted on a bright polished, continuously rounded steel balance bridge. You can see it has an overcoil hairspring shaped by hand, and it beats away at an aesthetically pleasing and 1890s appropriate 18,000 vibrations per hour. You can see how enormous that balance staff is. It extends all the way to the reverse of the watch, where you will find the escapement itself. We have twin mainspring barrels with solarized ratchet wheels. You can see that the bevels are a mile wide. This is the legacy of the original Legacy machine friend, Kari Voutilainen, who dictated that the Legacy machine watches should be the most finely finished of all Max Bucer timepieces. You can see pivot jewels set in golden chaton a la pocket watches, stripes or a Côte de Genève across the bridges, maximum strength beveling that includes some well-chosen interior angles and exterior points, black polished screw heads, and my favorite part, if you look inside the spokes of the wheels, they have been internally beveled, which is a bear to accomplish and often overlooked even on Geneva seal movements. And again, all of this, Max Bucer and Stephen McDonnell, 72-hour power reserve, 44 millimeters in diameter, but don't let that fool you. The watch doesn't quite wear that large. It's only about 51 millimeters lug to lug, so on my wrist, it does fit. I wouldn't wear it on a wrist smaller than mine, but it does fit. And most of the thickness is actually taken up by the sapphire. So this is a watch that wears very differently than you might think for a thick 44. It actually wears very light and wieldy, and it is surprisingly compatible with a cuff. It has G&F Chatelin's wonderful leaf spring style clasp that you'll find on everything from MB&F to Richard Mille, and it has the battle axe logo of MB&F. And again, this is a 33-piece limited edition in titanium. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. Nope, wait, I lied. I found something even better on my cart. Okay, here we are with the 2022 launch and one of Patek's best. This is the Calatrava 5226G, 40 millimeters in white gold. It uses a first for Patek Philippe, which is a textured charcoal dial. That's what Terry Stern is calling this dial design, which has a rough, irregular, granular profile, a fume smoked fade, lovely to die for syringe-style hands, and a Fotina ambiance that does nothing to counteract the luminescent intensity of this all-arounder. The case is spectacular. If you look on the reverse side, you can see that the lugs are actually joined to the case back, and they don't physically come in contact with the flanks of the case. You can see the gap between them. As a result, Patek is able to make the mid-case with triple row clou de Paris knurling all the way around. It looks as spectacular as it sounds. Sharp, angular, Carrera-like lugs. You have that to die for dial. And guess what? The latest Patek automatic movement, which means we have a quick set date, and we also have hacking seconds. On the reverse side, caliber 26330 SC. It debuted back in the 5212 and the Nautilus in 2019. 45-hour power reserve, anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, 6-position adjusted, free-sprung gyromax style balance, extensively and attractively hand-finished. And I should mention, it's guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day from the factory. It comes with a matching white gold buckle. This thing is to die for. Just over 8 millimeters thick and 40 millimeters in diameter. It's just over 47 millimeters from lug to lug, meaning you can wear this watch well on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. Again, it doesn't get much better than this in three-hand date Patek Philippe watches. Reach out once more to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing.